Good morning and welcome to Focus on the Palmetto State. I'm Judy Johnson. Too many of our country's veterans suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Thousands of veterans currently deal with the grueling symptoms of PTSD that include anxiety, grief, disconnection, reoccurring nightmares, and suicidal thoughts. Many of those suffering are still waiting for help from the VA. Our first guest this morning lost his brother 2.5 years ago to PTSD. Since then, Dr. Elliot Hirshorn has started raising money for veterans. The Sgt Zacharie Freedom Foundation is named in his brother's honor. And thank you, Dr. Hirshorn, for being here today to talk about this difficult story, I'm sure, for you to discuss.
It is difficult, but talking about it kind of helps with the grief process and turning it into a positive, and hopefully being able to help other people is what makes it worth it.
So tell me about Sgt. Zach. Did he always want to go into the military?
So it's kind of funny. We when we were kids growing up, we used to play like all kids do, and he would play Army, and I would be playing school. And I actually used to be a teacher, and now I educate people about their health. So it's kind of funny how we kind of moved into those roles that we used to play as kids.
Right.
But yeah, he always wanted to go into the military, and so after high school he did that, and he served for a number of years in the Air Force.
Okay.
And then he decided that he wanted to go see some combat, and so he switched over to the Army, and he was deployed first in Korea and then in Iraq, and so he did see combat duty while he was in Iraq in the late 2000s.
So he went to Iraq in the late 2000s, and
Yep.
What was his role there?
So he was Cavalry Scout, and so he was in charge of a couple of things. He did security on the base, and so he would be in the guard towers looking out for suspicious people coming up to that area, and he was also in charge of the personal security of the commander of the base, and so he would go out on all of the missions that the commander was on, providing personal security for that as well.
When he returned, how many years was he in Iraq?
He was there for a year.
When he returned, did he share some of the things that he saw there or any of the stories with you?
So like a lot of the veterans that come back, they tend not to share a whole lot for a number of different reasons. They have to relive that if they're telling stories. So a lot of the information that I just shared with you about what he was doing, I actually learned after he had passed away.
Really?
I met with one of his best friends, James Spencer, who he was in Iraq with, and actually Zach saved his life, James's life, from suicide. So James was, while he was there, contemplating suicide, and Zach was his buddy, and he was literally with him 24 hours a day, going to the bathroom with him and everything, making sure that he wouldn't kill himself. And then obviously, we'll get to that in a moment, but Zach ended up obviously taking his life when he came back to the States.
So what happened? What did you notice different about him when he returned?
So it's, like I said, they don't typically like to share a whole lot, so I didn't know how bad it was. But I did know that he had difficulty maintaining a job, and that's something that a lot of the veterans are dealing with because of the symptoms: anxiety, depression, flashbacks. They have difficulty maintaining a job. That was one outward sign that we had noticed. And then also, he did contemplate and talk about killing himself a couple of times that I was aware of, but there was a lot more going on that none of us in the family really knew about, that he wasn't sharing. And so it really wasn't until the day he died that I realized how serious it was.
Oh, that's so sad. And everything he gave for the country. You said that he tried to get help when he came back. Tell me about that.
So he had driven himself, this is stories that I learned after he had passed away, but he had driven himself to the VA twice and told them, that I want to kill myself. And they asked him if he had a plan, and since he didn't have a specific plan, they told him that there was nothing really that they could do for him. And so, obviously it's devastating now for us as his family, but let me just share you a little bit about the story about that day.
Okay.
So it was Labor Day weekend of 2014. My wife and I lived down here, and all my family is in New Jersey. So we flew up Friday before Labor Day. It was a beautiful day. We hung out we were at his house. We played with him, and he's got 4 beautiful children and his wife, and just had a wonderful time. And we left mid-afternoon, and we were all smiling, laughing, and singing the songs from that movie Frozen. And then it was my father-in-law's birthday, so we went down and visited with him. and shortly after we were wrapping up there, I got a phone call that he had hung himself. And there was really no indication. The whole day we spent with him, it was fantastic. And, obviously at this point, I'm extremely thankful that I had that last day with him,
Right.
but there was really no indication during that whole time that there was anything bothering him or going on. So
That's so sad. So there's nothing you could have done because there's
No.
nothing you knew.
Right.
Is that
Yeah.
typically how veterans respond when they come home with PTSD? Do they
Yeah.
hide it like that?
Some of them do because they feel like that they should not be dealing with these issues because they're
Mm-hmm.
warriors. They're supposed to be tough. And if there's anything that I can encourage any veterans that are watching this is that you're not alone. This is something that just happens because of the service that they provided. And so we would encourage them to reach out and get help beyond the VA. If they're not getting the answers there, then seek help. In this local area, we've got a website you can go to, greenvilleptsdhelp.com. You can check that out, and we can direct them to resources, whether it's with us or in other places, but we want to be able to get them the help that they need.
Well, since his death, you've been trying to make a negative more of a positive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard to do when it's your brother and all
It
the
is.
terrible things that happen.
So after I got that phone call, my wife, we drove to the hospital, and they didn't tell us beforehand that he had passed away already, but that he had just hung himself, and so there was just a little glimmer of hope
Right.
until we finally got to the hospital. But even there, while we were waiting for the rest of the family to gather, I was thinking to myself, how can we make a good come out of this? I'm a Christian, and I believe that what the Bible tells us, that God works good for all those that trust in Him. And so immediately in that moment, I'm trying to think, how can we make something good come out of this? And so we donated some of his organs and things like that night. But even after that, how can we prevent other families from having to deal with what we're dealing with? And it's just kind of an ongoing thing, obviously. So I got connected with an organization called Stop Soldier Suicide, and their goal is to help create a transition program for the veterans, even while they're still active, to get them prepared to leave the military and then follow them up even after they're out to make sure that things are going the way they're supposed to. It's basically like a reverse boot camp. So we started raising money for that particular group over the last 2 years in the spring through a campaign called Celebrate Another Birthday. And the idea behind that was that my brother didn't get to celebrate
Right.
any more birthdays. In fact, he just recently had a birthday. And so we use his birthday as the kickoff, and we go through Memorial Day, which is the day that we honor all those that have given the ultimate sacrifice, and we're raising money so that we can provide alternative care here in the Upstate to veterans who are not getting care for PTSD that they need in the Upstate. So we started raising money originally for this group, Stop Soldier Suicide, but I wanted to be able to raise money right here in the Upstate so it stays local and actually gets these veterans care that they need, so that they can, see some improvement in these symptoms and not ultimately make the same choice that Zach had to make.
Right.
So just this year we've launched Sgt Zach's Freedom Foundation, named in his honor, and we are fully approved by the IRS as a 501c3 charity, so all donations are tax deductible. And what we're going to do with that money is that any veterans who need help and they can't afford to get care that's outside the VA, we're going to use those funds through alternative means. And so as a functional neurologist, we help people in our office every day to get their brains to work better. So we can use it for care in our office, but I also work with other healthcare providers in the Upstate. I have a functional psychiatrist that I work with. So whatever care that they need that they're not getting from the VA, that's what this money is designed to be used for.
To provide care.
Yeah, for these veterans, yeah.
It seems like he had so much to live for. I mean, he didn't get
Yeah.
to see the birthdays of his children and
Yeah.
them getting married, and that's just so tragic.
Yeah,
It's hard to wrap your head around
it
the
is.
whys.
And that's really where it becomes difficult for the family that's left behind is you go through these milestones, first Christmas without him, his first birthday without him, and then the anniversary again of the death, and then just seeing the kids going through birthdays. 2 of his kids have birthdays this month, and
Right.
his wedding anniversary is this month. And so just all of these things come back and are constant reminders of he stepped out and made this sacrifice to serve, and ultimately was let down by those that, the system basically that didn't get him the help that he needed. So
That's
we're trying to provide some additional help that'll help these veterans.
How will you select the veterans that you help? Is there a number that they can call if they need help, or if a family member thinks that they need help?
Yeah, that's great. Great question. So if there's veterans that are watching that are looking for help, they can go to greenvilleptsdhelp.com, and that is through my office, and they'll just connect with us, and we'll see if we're a good fit for them or if we can get them to someone else to get them the care that they need. So we've already been helping veterans in our office even before we started the foundation. We've been just doing the care at no cost, and we've got a very great success stories. We've got a couple of gentlemen who have been doing really well. And we're going to get them to share their stories with us soon so that we can share with others the success that they've seen. But basically, just get in contact with us through that website, and we'll figure out if it's a good fit for us and how we can get them connected with the resources that they need.
It's hard to pinpoint how many returning soldiers have PTSD because a lot of them don't admit it, like you said.
Yes.
I've heard 20%. What numbers have you heard about that?
I've not heard a specific number either, and it is difficult because some of them, like I said, they're not seeking the help, and they're just kind of holding it all inside, which is really kind of the worst thing that they could be doing. But I do know that as of when my brother lost his life, it was 22 a day that were actually committing suicide. So 20, and that was just with 22 states reporting. So if you could extrapolate that, it's probably well higher than that in terms of the number that are committing suicide every single day. And the numbers that we're losing to suicide far outweigh the numbers that we've actually lost in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan combined in the last 15 years. So it's really becoming an epidemic, and we really need to be doing something about it, and so that's what we're trying to do with Sgt Zach's Freedom Foundation.
Okay, so people watching right now, and they hear this story, and they know that the soldiers are protecting this country, providing the safety and security of the country that we need. How would they give back or give to this foundation?
That's a great question. So first of all, if you know a veteran that needs help, send them to the greenvilleptsdhelp.com. But if they don't know anybody and they want to help us to be able to help the veterans, they can go to SGT for Sergeant, ZACH for Zach.org, so sgtzac.org, and that'll take them to our fundraising page. It is fully tax deductible, and our goal is between now and Memorial Day, we want to try to raise at least $10,000 to get this foundation off the ground so that we can start helping more and more veterans to be able to not have to deal with these PTSD symptoms as much, or hopefully at all.
Well, I certainly I hope people go online and do exactly that. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm sorry for the loss of your brother.
I appreciate that.
I feel like it's a divine appointment that brought you here today. I just happened to meet you at Simpsonville Rotary, so thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And so go online to donate to our local veterans suffering with PTSD. That website is sgtzac.org. And when we come back, we'll discuss the possibility of an increase in the South Carolina gas tax.